I guess like most people, I do like to look at the occasional crash video. Okay, maybe more than the occasional video. And maybe specifically motorcycle crash videos. Okay, fine. But I got on this train of thought because somebody was trying to convince me, a couple of people try to convince me that the United States needs a tiered licensing system for motorcycle riders. And through the ensuing war back and forth, one thing kind of stood out to me. Actually, two things. I was wrong, two things. The first is motorcycle riders in the UK still wreck their bikes even after going through the tiered licensing program. And in fact, the tiered licensing program essentially uses their accidents as evidence of its success. Um, because ultimately, what it considers success is that you don't get a license to ride a high powered bike until you've proven that you're capable of riding one safely. And if you wreck a low powered bike, then obviously you're not capable of riding a high powered bike safely. So it's almost like it takes pride in the failures at the lower levels because it indicates a higher chance of success at the higher level. So it's one of those wonderful systems in which a failure of the students is actually seen as the success of the program. The other thing is that motorcycle riders often don't learn how to ride motorcycles so they can ride safely. And in fact, people who are interested in being safe simply don't learn how to ride a motorcycle. And so there's a certain top to this also. We can sit here and look at crashes, look at wrecks for American, Russian, UK, whatever. But the major issue is that most people I know that ride motorcycles don't ride motorcycles in order to ride safely, in order to ride the speed limit, in order to obey traffic laws. They ride to violate traffic laws and make it easier for them to get away with it. And one of the things that's making it very easy for riders to violate the law and get away with it while riding a motorcycle is the increased number of motorcyclists who are interested in doing that. So the real problem I see is not necessarily the guy who rides his Gixxer 1,000 off the road at 150 miles an hour. That's probably not happening that much, really. It's the ride outs. It's the people who are riding in groups of 100, 200, 500 motorcycles and just having a whale of a time on public roads in the middle of traffic and enjoying themselves, basically, because most of them, 90% of them, are not having an accident, are not wrecking, are not dying, getting injured, and most importantly, not getting caught by the police. And this is a problem which has really been a problem on the East Coast for a while. I don't know for how long now, but still for a while. It's well established problem in Baltimore and in Florida. And you read about it in the news with New York City and the Range Rover incident this past year, and it's moving, west to Texas, and I guess at some point it was in California. But this is a problem which is starting to really take over the country. Is these large groups of motorcycle riders all blatantly violating the law, all with no interest in riding in a law-abiding fashion, but who ride safely and have a ton of fun doing it. And what I want to see is, whether that's going to continue to grow as a problem or whether it's going to be something that stand out. But I know who I don't want to see trying to solve this problem. And this is a bigger problem that I think this country has, which right now is much more pressing. And it has to do with Hillary Clinton. And the basic problem is that Hillary Clinton is probably not going to be president. She might be the Democratic candidate, but she's probably not going to win. If she runs against a solid Republican candidate, she's probably going to lose. I personally wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton anyway, but that's a side point. So, assuming that Hillary Clinton is not going to be the next United States president, what is the real problem? Well, the problem, as we all know, I think that a good 25% at least of the United States public recognizes, and probably half of the, at least half of the Republicans and maybe all the Democrats, is that Donald Trump is probably going to be the Republican candidate for president in 2016. And God knows we don't need Donald Trump as president. I mean, I can't imagine a worse candidate for president than Donald Trump. It amazes me how the Republican mentality would promote this man as their candidate for president. Now, you can talk about the Democrats all you want, but Trump is easily a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton. There's no question about it. But the sheer sad fact of the matter is that these are going to be the two candidates, Trump and Clinton. Sanders, I haven't never heard him speak, never heard him interviewed, nothing. And Clinton, I don't think it matters what she says. Nobody believes what she says. Everybody thinks she doesn't know what she's talking about, and nobody really trusts her. But how is Donald Trump better than either one of them? I mean, I would personally run for president myself rather than see either one of these two people elected president. So I just kind of have to say, I have clips in my history of Jeremy Clarkson saying Americans are fat, stupid, and have no class, and so forth. And I got to say this, if we elect either one of these two people as president of the United States, I wash my hands. I literally have to say this. I have my hands in the United States of America. How could we do this? How could we do this? Either Clinton or Trump. You're telling me it's going to be either Clinton or Trump. What the fuck? Now, all I know is that if there's one person, or I'd say two people, if there's two people I don't want to have to manage the situation that's developing right now in Syria, it's either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Now, let me explain why to you. And I will tell you that recently I've been exposed to some more news outside of the American media on what's going on in Syria. Okay. The American media, as far as I understand it, which is largely CNN and to some extent the New York Post, but still, is saying that we had things under control in Syria. The United States had things under control in Syria until the Russians got involved. We were supporting the moderate Islamic rebels in their fight against Assad. Assad then turned and started attacking the citizens in the Syrian citizens with these cluster bombs and these bucket bombs and all this other stuff, leftover Soviet munitions, basically taking the war to the Syrian people because he couldn't beat the Syrian rebels on the battlefield. That created this huge humanitarian crisis, which has caused a flood of Syrian refugees to leave the Syria and occupy Western governments and all this kind of stuff. And you know the story with that. So why did the Russians step in? Okay, well, the Russians apparently, at least according to Western media, stepped in because Assad was losing. And the Russians wanted to prop up Assad. Now, then there was also the terrorist attack in, I guess it was Lebanon, or yes, with the plane that was brought down, the Russian plane, airflow plane that was brought down by a terrorist. There have been other terrorist incidents, I'm sure. Ignoring the situation in Ukraine for right now, for the moment, the Russians decided to get involved in the fight against ISIS. Okay. So they also sent troops to the Middle East. And like the United States, they were bombing terrorists, supposedly, okay, in the Middle East. But here's the problem. The problem is that the terrorists that the United States were bombing, ISIS, according to the United States, were in the south of the country, south of Aleppo, between Aleppo and Damascus. The terrorists that the Russians are bombing are north of Aleppo, between Aleppo and Turkey. These are the same rebels that the United States is trying to aid, and they also cover the territory of the Kurds south of Turkey, which is another issue entirely. But for now, let's just draw a line through Aleppo going north to west to east and talk about what's going on above that line and what's going on below that line. Okay, Damascus is in the southwestern part of Syria. Now, as a side note, I challenge any of these Republican candidates, and I don't care who they are, and probably Hillary Clinton also, to name even 5 countries on this map, much less on this smaller map or larger map of Central and Eastern Europe. But be that as it may. So now, in the map I'm going to show here, you see Syria, you see Turkey, you see Lebanon, you see Georgia and Azerbaijani and Turkmenistan and Saudi Arabia and so forth. And the little tiny part up on the top right-hand corner is Russia on the other side of Georgia from Turkey. West of Georgia is the Ukraine. And that is to the north of Turkey. Okay. The south of Turkey is Syria. The big issue that Turkey has is that Turkey is dealing with the Russians on the north side of Turkey, and they're dealing with the Russians now on the south side of Turkey. They're dealing with the Russians on the east side of Turkey, where Georgia is, also the west side. I believe that's the Caspian Sea. Russia is putting quite the moves on Turkey at the moment. Okay, but here's again the real issue. Looking at that line between or through Aleppo, okay, where is ISIS? North or south of that line? Because the United States says that ISIS is south of that line, and Russia says that ISIS is north of that line. The United States says that the troops north of the line through Aleppo that are fighting the Syrian army are moderates. The Russians say they are ISIS extremists. Okay. Now, not to say that Russia is not bombing troops south of Aleppo or forces south of Aleppo, but the problem is that they are bombing the same Islamic fundamentals that we in the United States are supporting, or we're trying to support with our bombing. The Russians have come on the side of Assad, but we were against Assad. So that's one problem. The other problem is, why are they actually bombing in Turkey and along the Turkish-Syrian border and not near the area? Well, they are bombing in Aleppo. They did bomb in Aleppo, but they're also bombing right up near the border with Turkey, while telling the world that they're not flying planes near the Turkish border. They are bombing oil truck caravans between what they call ISIS-controlled oil sites in northern Syria and the Turkish business conglomerates in Turkey, which are processing that oil, which they claim are run by the sons of the Turkish president. Okay, the Russians are essentially claiming that ISIS is collaborating with Turkey to produce and bring oil to market. That is their argument. And that is why they're doing this bombing. They're bombing oil caravans running between supposedly ISIS-controlled territory in north and northeastern Syria and Turkey. And those caravans are collecting in Turkey on the border in sort of transit points. So my question, and I will put this question out to you, all those of you who think that you are seriously aware of the issues and aware of what's going on in the Middle East and think that either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton will make a great president, is how the presidential candidate of your choice will handle this situation. Okay. Obama has basically grounded U.S. forces, air forces in Syria out of threat of the SS-400 anti-aircraft systems that the Russians brought in to the area after Turkey shot down an Su-24 along or over Turkish airspace, in Turkish airspace, so supposedly. The Russians are saying, no, it wasn't in Turkish airspace, and it was a mistake. Turkey apparently just decided to fly an F-16 out into Syria and shoot down Russian forces flying over Syrian airspace. Well, it turns out that the Russian forces are actually flying missions right up to and possibly over the Turkish border. And now they're saying that they're doing it because Turkey is working with ISIS, protecting ISIS. And these are ISIS-controlled trucks with ISIS-controlled oil. And Turkey is whitewashing the oil and taking the money and obviously paying ISIS for some of the oil. And that's their motivation. So somewhere, something here is not right. Okay. But the bottom line is this. Are the Turks collaborating with ISIS? Have the Turks been collaborating with ISIS? And what does that mean in terms of activities by the United States in Syria and activities by Russia in Syria? What actually is going on and what do we do? Okay. Do we sit back and let the Russians essentially cut off Turkish oil supplies from Syria and possibly from Iraq and from Iran under the claim that these are controlled by terrorists or not? What do we do? Because that is going to be the issue. That's going to be the issue the next president has to deal with. Do we watch what's going on in the Middle East or do we get involved? That's the big question. Now, let me ask you this one more time. Do you want either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton making these decisions? Ask yourself that question when you think about who the next president should be.